Welcome to Memorable Marketing by MediaGroup. This is episode 28, and today we have a very special guest. We have Daryl Alfonso, who is a team leader at marketing operations at Amazon's Web Services. And today we talk about a couple of things that are very important. Throw away the checklist. Don't do what everyone else is doing just for the sake of doing that. We also talk about being obsessed with your customer and how important that is in every decision you make. And finally, we talk about the educational journey. It's a very interesting talk. You'll learn a lot, and stay tuned.
We pay attention to competitors, but we obsess over customers.
Daryl, thank you so much for being with us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited about our conversation.
So thank you. So can we talk a little about your journey prior to joining Amazon Web Services?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked at a range of different companies. My first company was actually a startup. I was probably one of 10 employees. We were selling mobile marketing and email marketing software. And that's, I think, when I became really enamored with this sort of game of business. You know, it's so much more fun than what you study in college. And I've always thought of it that way, where whether it's sales or marketing or product, you are tweaking things and changing things, and then you're trying to make the score go up. And that score is revenue and number of customers. So I became really interested in business from there. And then I worked at some mid-sized enterprises, media companies in Southern California. I was introduced then to marketing automation. And that, for those of your listeners that don't know, is, the sort of programmatic execution of many of the marketing activities that a team will do on a daily basis using technology. And some people refer to it as email marketing, but there's a lot more to it than that. I really became fascinated with it. I started to do large projects at work, large system implementations, driving business results and growing teams, just really from the basis of using marketing automation. And I also started to, contribute to the community. I started to write articles. I started to create how-to resources to help other people with marketing automation. I think that's how I was fortunate enough to win a few awards in the industry, and that introduced me to I guess this other practitioners in the field that also were doing the same things that I did. One of them happened to work at Amazon Web Services, so we started talking. Luckily, the stars aligned, so I moved from Southern California to Seattle, where Amazon's headquartered. That's also near where Microsoft is. Yeah, I've been at Amazon Web Services for about 3 years. And the way that I describe what my team does is we own the marketing technology that supports thousands of marketers and helps them create digital experiences for our customers. So we enable and support and empower them to do so.
So you empower your team to help people who are using Amazon Web Services, or you empower your team to go out and get customers from Amazon Web Services?
There is a large number of marketers in Amazon Web Services.
Yes.
The company itself is large, but our number of marketers is in the thousands, which is kind of crazy to think about. But not really so much, because we're a global organization. We have offices in Australia and China and Japan, and sizable teams in each region.
Yeah.
And then those marketing teams are trying to drive awareness and education and ultimately adoption of the suite of services that we have, products and services that we have at AWS. Now those marketers, especially today, all use different types of tools and platforms to engage customers. This could be on social, this could be on email, this could be on website. Martech and marketing technologies I'm so fascinated with. It's so interesting how much non-technical professionals can do, without needing a developer, without needing an engineer. You can go so far now, versus the past. So,
which is the Web 3.0. At least that's how I take it. That now more and more people have access to more and more computing power, more and more tools and systems to get into the next place. You don't need to have developers necessarily. Now, just for the record, because many people do know what Amazon Web Service is, but a lot of people still don't know what Amazon Web Services is. Can you describe it, what it is?
We offer cloud computing services to businesses of all sizes. There's over 175 different products and services, from compute to storage to database services. And that really only scratches the surface. So you could have someone like a single developer trying to launch their startup, and they host their entire business for their app on the cloud. And you could have, some of the leading, online streaming services hosting their inventory on the cloud too. Very, one person's paying, a very small amount, and another company could be paying a really large amount. But I think a lot of the benefit, and this is a little bit in the weeds, but there's so much benefits from hosting your servers on the cloud, and having it fully managed, versus, you have a facility where you're managing servers, and you have staff that are, have these big mainframes, and there's just so much complexity and investment that goes into it. Whereas today, just go online, start an account, and you can start a business from scratch right there. I think that's the beauty of Amazon Web Services and of cloud computing.
Yeah, and it's so scalable. I mean, it's just, again, Netflix is a very well-known brand around the world, and its a backbone is Amazon Web Services. It's amazing how they can reach and how they can do demand on millions of people watching at the same time. I do have a little gripe with you. It's not with you, but Amazon. So, and it's not a question you can answer, but I gotta say it. So I have Netflix, and I also got Amazon Prime, and there's some great shows on there. And by the way, Jack Reacher, I think it's a great show. Just leaving that aside. But when I use Netflix, it is so much faster using Amazon Web Services, and Amazon Prime is a little bit slower, and I don't understand, but I guess it's technology. I know this is not your department. I just want to say, because I think it's funny that their service is a little bit superior. I find it. Maybe it's because I'm in Australia and downloading. I don't know what's going on, but it's a little more funny in that way, I think. So
yeah, I don't know what to say about Netflix is awesome. It always it impresses me and that's why they're one of the leading companies. The way that their user experience is, just fantastic. And I think that Amazon Prime Video is catching up. There's some cool features that I think Prime Video has that Amazon doesn't. I don't know if you noticed that it identifies the cast.
Oh, I love that.
You see that?
The X-ray. I love that. So you can stop and you can.
That's so cool. Yeah. So I guess they chose to invest there first.
Yeah. That's a song playing. All that stuff. It's amazing. So this is not what we're supposed to talk about. Just a little person.
Yeah.
All right. So computing in the cloud, services scaling fast, one person to many, many people around the world. That's what you do. So from your perspective, I know you said you've been there 3 years. So Amazon Web Services is one of the first ones to really go into cloud computing quite a while ago. And now other companies are trying to catch up. Of course, you got Microsoft, you got Dell, you got IBM, you got Alibaba. So all these are trying to go into your area. From a marketing perspective, how do you keep them at bay? How do you keep being ahead?
Jeff Bezos is quoted saying this, but that we pay attention to competitors, but we obsess over customers. So that's really the focus of our strategy, and you'll hear that a lot of times. At Amazon, we call it customer obsessed, but it's very true. This is the main thing that we do is all around voice of the customer initiatives, constant feedback, making sure that our roadmap is based on customer requirements and customer requests. And I think I find that to be so refreshing and really great business practice. You'll get, and I before coming to Amazon, I would obsess. I'm not gonna. I'll be honest. I would obsess over what the competition is doing. I'd look at their website, look at their marketing, what are they doing? What are they doing? And, try to come up with these different counter moves, which there's value in doing. But when you really think about the customer, what happens is I think you innovate faster, and you are able to like look around the corner and see what they need almost before they need it, and then deliver that in the business. And one way that we put it is we're inventing on behalf of customers, and that I think is such a great strategy, because if you think about it, there's this concept of like when you think about competition, it becomes very finite. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's Simon Sinek wrote a book called The Infinite Game. It's a very similar concept where, okay, I'll take this, you take this, I'll take this. And that's what focusing on the competition is. But when you continue to invent new things on behalf of customers, it's infinite. What does next year look like? What does the next 10 years look like? We don't know yet. We're just going to continually listen and invent. And I think that is a huge reason for our success is that customer obsession.
Can you walk me through a customer journey? Someone signing up for the first time, how do they hear about it? How do you promote it? How do you make sure you're relevant in searches, or do you do campaigns? I mean, what's your typical customer acquisition journey? Because once they get in and they set everything up, I presume they stay for a while, because once you get into this ecosystem and this structure, you stay for quite some time. The retention is there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a product-led component of it, because you can sign up for AWS with just a simple credit card, and you don't have to pay anything. And then as you build and scale your use of the services, then your bill will kind of grow to match whatever you're using. So it's kind of like pay per use without a contract. So that's I think that product led component is very important. So because it's so easy to get started and to acquire new customers, we have developers all around the world that just try it out. It's like might as well try it. So the main way that we focus and actually think about our marketing is education based. So for example, especially before the pandemic, we would create educational events all around the world, in the form of summits, in the form of workshops, seminars, and they're free. You just, we host it in your local city, and we just say, this is how you can run your business on AWS, and come if you want and come to learn. And that sort of education, we say education is job zero, right? The more we educate, the more that we benefit, because, we believe we have an excellent, valuable product that businesses can really use to drive value. And the more that they know and understand cloud computing, the more they'll turn to AWS as a brand that they trust, and as what they rely on to run their business from whether it's computing or whether it's data security, or whether it's hosting all of their assets. And in addition to that, we have a great partner ecosystem of companies that help other of consultancies and firms that actually help deploy AWS for customers, and then complementary products and services that work really well seamlessly with AWS's products. So you'll naturally have a lot of that kind of come in there as well. And I think that, this is kudos to our leadership and to our marketing leadership, but we also have a very, very strong brand. You know what I mean? And that I think, I think it's difficult to understand what brand does, because it can always be fuzzy until I think you work for a really strong brand, or at least compete against a really strong brand. Because to me, when you need something, let's say you have a problem, and that there's a company or a solution that you automatically think about, that's brand power. You know what I mean? If you if I want a pizza, I only think of three companies. If I want to buy a new computer, I only think of two companies. You know what I mean? That strength is invaluable. And it's the same, I think, with cloud computing. There's automatically I think AWS is automatically someone that you think about when you think about how to run your business on the cloud.
So Dale, we talked about before the customer journey from the educational side. You put a lot of emphasis in that, people learning. But what other channels are you using or campaigns are you using to get new customers coming into the shop?
One thing that I think that we put a heavy focus on before I address sort of the net new customers is that there are really millions of customers on the platform, and that have in some way or shape or form tried AWS. So our own data and our first party data is a big source of our learning, our insight, and how we do marketing. I think that for maybe a startup or a smaller company, your website and your database itself isn't as valuable because you're looking to really expand that quickly. Whereas ours is a treasure trove of data, and the amount of traffic that we get to our site really enables us to customize that experience both before the login and after the login, to really learn about them and to remember that the way that we do marketing is education. So trying to serve up the best educational opportunities that they can, whether that be an email or when they're coming to our site. In terms of sort of awareness and then continually driving net new business, we do recently. It's been heavy on online and virtual events. Like, for example, we did our user conference usually draws like anywhere from 40 to 60,000 people in Las Vegas. We do that in December. We did it virtual at the start of the pandemic. I think, I can't remember the numbers, but it was like 100,000 people that came. And then this one was a hybrid. So we get a tremendous amount of attendees and awareness from that. And then what we try to do in each region is host smaller versions of that event. We invite keynote speakers, chief technology officers to speak on, where the industry is going and where the cloud is going. Those are really big for us. And then, just trying to drive people to those events and to those educational opportunities through all of the channels. So we have, I think, a fair presence on social media, both paid and organic. Email is a really big channel for us, especially because of, the size of our database and the number of our customers. And then we do some experimentation with things like content syndication, and the paid advertising. But most of those efforts we use to drive people to educational opportunities, namely events, but they could be webinars, they could be courses as well.
Yeah.
So I think that those are sort of the main drivers of how we get awareness.
So a question I always ask people when I interview about marketing: what is the most important, the story or the numbers? What are you going to say?
The story or the numbers? The story or the numbers? This is an interesting question. Because, and I'll ask one back at you. In sports, which is more important, offense or defense? And that's how I always answer questions like this.
That's a good
because,
one.
Because, I think that, like, let's say it's basketball or football or soccer. When it's time to play defense, you play defense. When it's time to play offense, you play offense. And it doesn't really make sense to think about only one side. You always have a strategy for both. I think that that's how good marketers are. I think they they're revenue focused, but also they have sort of the larger brand building and story included in there. I think that the answer, like which is more important or which comes through more, depends on who you are.
Yes.
And what your company is. I think that especially for startups and smaller companies, you don't have a lot of resources, so it has to be based on the numbers. Otherwise, when I worked at a startup, if we didn't meet the numbers, you start having to lay people off.
Yes.
And it's the brand is something that you'd have to try to, almost hack your way through, trying to like figure out interesting ways. They used to call it like guerrilla marketing, where you try to stir up some press by doing interesting things that are free.
Yeah.
But then when you're on the flip side, like I am now, you kind of see the power of the brand, like I was mentioning before, and how you don't even need to do much to continue to grow. I don't want to say that it's like it's easy, but I do want to say that there's this flywheel component, right? Where, since the flywheel is turning so fast, it's more of identifying ways to keep customers happy so that it continues to turn, versus all the startup effort that's required to get the flywheel to start moving. You know what I mean? So I think that is probably where the differences will come into play.
It's always that debate, right? What should we focus on more? But you're right. It's also defense and offense in any sport. You need to do both. Otherwise, you're either going to lose a lot or you're not going to win. So it's the same thing. You're right. What are the 3 things you wish you were taught before you joined marketing? What have you learned in your journey prior to being in AWS and now AWS? What are the 3 things you wish somebody had told you before you started this whole venture?
So one is kind of an interesting answer, is that it's that clear thinking is reflected in clear writing. And I think that for marketers, it's often really underrated, the skill of being a good writer.
Yeah.
And this really comes through in product marketing, in copywriting, and then just in general communication. One interesting thing to know about really large, and then, maybe you've all worked at mega enterprises before, but for people that haven't, almost 50% of your time is internal communication projects where you're letting people know what you're doing and getting them to buy in. And you can only do that through really clear thinking and clear writing. So I wish I would have, I never really valued writing until a few years ago. And at Amazon, we have a writing culture. And this is when I think that my respect for writing really kind of peaked, because that's a really strong thing. And I think it really would have helped in my previous career. Another thing that I think that a lot of marketers don't think about is, I think that it's undervalued, the idea of your own experimentation and your own first party data and your own engagement with customers, what's happening there and what you do about it. I personally think that a lot of the education for marketers has largely been driven by vendors selling to marketers. So Martech vendors, for example. And it's been good and bad. It's been good because the technology has been getting better and better, but it's been bad because I think many marketers almost look for a checklist of things that they need to do their jobs, when the industries are so different, the customers are so different. If everyone follows the same checklist, then everyone looks and sounds the same. So there's no differentiation. And that's the opposite of what you want. You want to stand out, and you want to be noticed, and you want to be picked. So I think that I think is another really big thing that I wish I had, and especially for junior marketers, it's hard not to, because you actually don't know. So you look for documentation and resources to teach it to you. But I think that, and I'm an example of that, back, when earlier on in my career, I would just take these books and these checklists and I would just follow them to the T. More and more I'm realizing, just trying new things is can really work. And sometimes when the going practices are, don't do this, sometimes doing it is different and it makes it really interesting. So that's probably another one, I think.
From a marketing perspective, once you get a customer in, and I briefly touched on before, I talked a little about retention. We now live in a world where there's many different systems, right? Either you're into the Apple ecosystem or you're not, or either you're an Android person or you're not, an iPhone, or either use AWS or you don't. But once you get in there, people tend to tick around. I know it's more of a product-related question, but does that affect your marketing approach? You can see that if somebody comes in, they stay for a longer time because once they start using it, it's going to be very hard for them to switch.
That's really the key part, is switching cost. And I think that the more technical the product, the more it's weaved in and out throughout your business, the higher the switching cost. So a great example is CRM, right? So if you implement Salesforce or you implement, Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics, I always say this, the thought of migrating a CRM just scares me. I just get scared of that topic because of how much work you would have to do, and I've done like a minor one. So I think that switching cost is key. And that's why it's a good idea to be the company that sort of teaches you and shows you the value of cloud computing, right? Because similar to, when Salesforce came out, it was like the no software kind of thing. Like they were saying, don't host your CRM on premise. Host it in the cloud. There's so many benefits. And it's sort of a movement, if you will, right? Of, hey, rather than run all of your expensive servers and hire all these people and keep a very high expense cost, switch to the cloud for all of these different benefits, like if not more benefits than having your own. So being the sort of champion or the evangelist of that movement really comes in handy, because then they look to you as the sort of provider of this new experience that they want to do. And then from a marketing standpoint, that's the first message. The second message is all around customer success, right? How are companies going to be successful using AWS? So, and that's why it leads to my educational sort of initiative to help companies learn and use. Because if a business is successful on your product, there's not really, unless they're being really stingy, there's not really much reason to leave, especially with the high switching cost. One of the ways that I think that we try to drive customer success is by looking at product and service usage data, because you can see which products and services they're using, what that usage level is, and then drawing sort of insights from the patterns within that data. And this is a great exercise for any marketer to do, and it's to understand and uncover what makes a customer successful. Like, what are some of the things that they have in common? Are they using this combination of products and services? Are they in this industry? Have they, gone through these certification paths? And then once you identify what makes people successful, the marketing initiatives then can turn into, okay, how do we drive the customers that aren't there yet to that level? So I think that retention is all about looking at what's really happening with your customers and identifying where their real pain points are.
And that's one of the things that comes up talking to you a lot. And you said about Jeff Bezos, it's very customer obsessed, which I think is a great starting point. So if we take that and, you talked about, you have these seminars, 100,000 people showing up, especially when it's virtual, and you're sharing all this information. But on what other parts from your marketing perspective, when you think of customer obsess first, how does it influence the marketing that you do at Amazon? Can you give us some example of that?
A lot of it is customer experience. It starts how I think one of the benefits is that we have something called the leadership principles, and there's 16 of them, and they're operationalized in our culture. So even to get hired, even to get promoted, even to showcase what you're doing, you always have to tie it to the leadership principles. And these are, like customer obsession, deliver results. If anyone's not familiar with them, I definitely recommend to look them up, because it's almost a master class, I think, in great business. But customer obsessed, when your company is obsessed over the customer and the customer experience, it cuts away at a lot of the random projects and less important projects that you have. So for example, if we have 10 different priorities that we need to think about, we always will order the ones that improve the customer experience first, right? Even at the sake of revenue, even if this project is going to drive more sales for the business, it comes second to the customer. So I think that it's more of it's not really something. I mean, I think we're always thinking about it, so that's part of it. But it's more of how it drives our decision making throughout our marketing programs.
So being customer obsessed, what you're saying is that it becomes clear focused. You eliminate all the noise and all the things that distract you, because it's just one thing you're focused on. And by doing that, you can make better decisions from a marketing perspective. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
If you look at marketers today, and I did this exercise before and looked at all the things that our marketers are doing. They're doing data analytics, marketing automation, social media marketing, email marketing, content. It's like it runs the gamut of things that we have to do.
Yeah.
And marketers are getting overwhelmed.
Yes.
And they're buying all these different tools to get their work done. But where is the customer in all of those things that they have to do? You know what I mean? And the risk there is you end up doing things just to do it, just because you think that that's what you're supposed to do. Whereas it should be the customer driving the initiatives, So one of my favorite ways to do that, to start cutting through the noise, is to take a look at a customer experience or a customer initiative and say, hey, what are the top 5 things that we could do to improve this? Like if it's the website, when they come across this page, what are 5 things that we can do to make this a great experience? And that becomes your project list. I mean, it takes a long time to think about those 5 things, but those are what, rather than starting at the end with a bunch of these list of digital marketing tactics that you can do, no, we're starting with the customer and the top 5 things that we need to do. And it's just a game changer in the way that it'll change your work if you do that.
So no checklist. That's what I'm hearing you say over and over again. I think you're right, because everyone is doing it, as you said before. If everyone is doing it, you're not different. How do you compete on that if you're just doing what everyone else is doing?
Yep. And that's what you see. That's what you see on LinkedIn, where you'll see companies sharing articles and no one's reading them. That's what happens, because they think that's what they're supposed to do. Oh, we wrote an article. Now we're supposed to share it on LinkedIn or Twitter. But no one's looking at it because, they think that's what they're supposed to do, but that's not what their customers are asking for. And that's why we get into this circle of, I think we're supposed to do this, so let's do it, and where there's no real purpose, value, or intent behind it. So just starting to think that way, I think for most marketers, it will really improve the way you do your work.
Let's switch it around then, saying, okay, so obviously, as you mentioned before, AWS, you got millions of customers, so you have endless amount of data. But when you don't have that much data and you are a small startup and you are trying to be different out there, and you don't follow the checklist, how would you go about that? You mentioned earlier that you would get the feedback from a customer, but you would write about their journey or their problem. So how would you address that from your experience now?
I mean, I've worked at startup companies, I've worked at mid-sized companies, and I think that one of the best things to do is just really understand the value that your customers are getting. There's a lot of talk about product market fit, which I think that's a valuable thing. Figuring out exactly who your product is for and how it helps, and then trying to replicate that experience over and over again. If you have one great customer that is getting a fantastic return on investment, then there are other customers that are very similar that can have the same experience. And then figuring out how to tell that story broadly and in an interesting way, I think is extremely valuable. So that's the first thing that I would do, is really nailing down that positioning, that messaging, and those customer stories. And then when it comes to customer acquisition, and when it comes to penetrating a market, I think that this also comes from knowing where your customers are and where they're hanging out. And all of that's different. If you have a technical audience, they're probably reading, trade publications. If you have a marketing audience, they're on social media. They're on Twitter. They're on LinkedIn. They're even on some of the newer channels. And some other folks are in trade shows and in events. So understanding where your customers are and then finding out how to deliver value through those channels is the best way to go about it. And it really doesn't take a lot of money to do it in a good way. I think it just takes a lot of thought. I think it takes creativity, research, and then overall the desire, I think, to do it.
Yeah, but I also think it takes courage to go against the checklist, as we talked about numerous times, because you're supposed to do this. And so if you don't do this and you fail, then you might lose your job. So it's better to be safe than sorry and just, we did this. There's no results, but we did what we're supposed to do. So it is courageous to say, okay, let's forget about the checklist. Let's reinvent the wheel. Let's look it from the other side and attack it differently. And that takes courage. And many CMOs who are in positions are, of course, hired by CEOs, and there's numbers that need to be met on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. And if you don't hit them, you're out and just hire another CMO. So it's hard for a CMO to resist that pressure and fight for that position, knowing that that's right, and then prove it, and have the time and the energy and the resources to prove it. I think that's the hard part for most marketing companies.
You're right. It takes a lot of courage. I think that, and I'm not talking about AWS, because I think we have a fantastic culture centered around the customer. But I think that for a lot of companies, it becomes difficult to become agile and to try new things, because you have an organization that is made up of a lot of people, and those people have jobs which represents their livelihood, and sometimes large decisions can maybe eliminate people's jobs. So it becomes I think it's an incredible balance that you need to do depending on your organization. In terms of, and that's why I think that a reality check is to kind of know what you want to do and the change that you want to drive in your career. Because if it's those large, broad changes and they're splashy and interesting and provocative, then I think the startup environment is much better, because you don't have the kind of weight that some other companies have. I think that other companies, enterprises can drive change, but it's different. It's done differently. It's done through process. It's done through change management and through winning hearts and minds within your organization, which takes time. It's kind of like political campaigns. I hate to say that, but it kind of is. You have these initiatives that you're championing. So it's for marketers that are listening and trying to figure out what they want to do with their career, I would keep that in mind too. that companies of different sizes are different. So
yes. And also, if you are AWS, you're a super tanker. It takes a long time to turn and slow down a super tanker as opposed to a startup, which is a tiny little speedboat, maybe with only 2 people in it. Daryl, what keeps you up at night?
In my profession, and that is the more technical marketers, the marketing operations folk, we tend to let technology drive strategy and not the other way around. And the truth is that strategy should drive technology. And it's backwards to look at a list of tools or a list of features and let that determine what you're going to do for the year. And it's very backwards, and it's very common, unfortunately. So I think that's a big one. And I think it's the recurring theme in our conversation today is that the strategy should come from the customer and what they want and what they need and how you can influence them. And that's what should dictate what your marketing is going to be, not the tools that are available, not the channels that are available, and not what some checklist the vendor sends you.
That's the checklist. I like that. That's going to be the defining title for this chapter. Thank you so much, Daryl. It's been absolutely a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
If you have listened to our podcast or watched our podcast before, you will know that we have our producer, Zane, who is sitting in the background trying to make sure we sound good and look good. Maybe not from the face value, but at least from the camera perspective. And I like to bring Zane in always to hear his thoughts and his ideas and feedback on the current episode. What do you think about Dale and AWS?
Daryl presented a quandary because at the very start, I thought that his answer to what comes first, what's more important, the data or the story, I thought 100% it was going to be the data.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised about that as well.
Yeah,
yes,
because Daryl opened up with he got into marketing because he loves the game of marketing.
Yes,
and treating doing these strategies to make the numbers grow. And absolutely. Yeah. But then at the end, and the talk about experimentation and throwing out the checklist and not defining your strategy by what is available, like what someone's making available to you, like actually thinking about your customer. And I think, it ended up being a very good balance of both.
Yes, it did.
This one, yeah.
I know I said that when we ended there, it was the title of this episode is going to be throw away the checklist, but it's brave of him to say so. And it's right, because we are all, conventional wisdom. Everybody's following. Our competitors do this and we do this. We have to do the same thing. We have to write an article. We have to put out a podcast. We have to do these things, right? But there has to be some sort of strategy and value behind it. And don't do it just to do it, but do it thoughtfully. And I liked what he was saying about that.
Absolutely. And I think also because, of course, Amazon is trading from a market leader position.
Yes.
So I think or at least their approach to marketing is what a lot of people are going to be looking towards. Yes. And I think definitely that education-based marketing, like not pushing just like, this is what we have available. This is how we do it. This is how you can do it. I think that is definitely something that we've seen replicated throughout a lot of the people that we've interviewed on the podcast. But again, that kind of position, acting as a market leader in the way that they market as well as what they're marketing. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's just fascinating. Good to hear. And also, working for such a big company, AWS, which was a first mover and is still a market leader in it, was so focused on customer. Yeah, I love that. I think that's customer obsession. And his point about if you only focus on that, then the competition, it doesn't matter what the competitor does, because we're focused on our customers and we will win in the long end. Yeah, sure, they might have a smart gimmick over here and there and we can learn from it, but we need to focus on the customer. That was really insightful to me.
Absolutely, because if you focused on your competitor, all you're doing is replicating what they're doing. If you focus on the customer, then you're innovating. So,
yeah. It's a really good episode.
Great episode.
It's always a pleasure, Zane.
Likewise.